are still struggling, just tell them that I am making a recording of this as well, so then they can always just access that subsequently in the event that they're still struggling to get online. But normally how it works, if you struggle, just log out and then log back in. It generally fixes the problem that's happening in the background. Okay, so let's go on with Learning Unit 3. Now, in last week's class, we specifically looked at what is a tax invoice, what is an abridged invoice. Now, I want to see if you guys remember what we discussed. So let's look at the first question. You can just type your answers in the chat box for me. So what are the minimum requirements for a tax invoice? So what do you need to show on the tax invoice for it to be a valid tax invoice? Okay, so Bernice says it needs to be 5,000. Okay, so Bernice, just remember, when we talk about the 5,000 limit, that is not necessary to do with what's the requirements for a valid tax invoice. That talks about when we need a specific type of document. So when it exceeds 5,000, you need to have a valid tax invoice. But the question asked you, what are the minimum requirements? So what do I need to see on that tax invoice so that it is valid? Okay, so Daniel said the name of the buyer and the seller. Okay, that's correct. But Daniel, remember, not only the name of the buyer and the seller, there's other information that also needs to appear on it. Who can tell me what other information do we need to show on a tax invoice? What's some other items that need to appear on there? Okay, so Tumelo says their VAT numbers, their address, yes. So Rafilwe also says VAT registration number. Okay, remember the VAT registration number is for both the buyer and the seller. So it's not only for one, it's for both parties. So when you answer a question like this, you need to tell me it's for both the buyer and the seller, and not just the VAT registration number, because then you would actually lose one of the marks. You need to specify exactly for who it is. Okay, what other things also need to be on there? So we've got the details of the seller, which was their name, their address, the VAT registration number. We also covered it for the same for your buyer, which was the name, address, and VAT registration number. Okay, but there's other things that also need to appear on the tax invoice. Okay, so the date, yes. The word tax invoice. Okay, excellent, yes. Okay, other things that also generally appear on your tax invoice is your settlement term. So when will the buyer have to repay the amount? You also show your amount at the bottom. Needs to be amount exclusive of VAT. You show the VAT amount as well as the amount inclusive of VAT. And then generally each document needs to have a unique sequence number so that I can differentiate the different invoices when we submit them to SARS. Okay, who can tell me what's an abridged tax invoice? Okay, so we've discussed what a tax invoice is. How does the abridged tax invoice differ from our normal tax invoice? So I'm just going to repeat the question. How does an abridged tax invoice differ from a tax invoice? Okay, so Tumelo says a abridged tax invoice only has the details of the seller. Yes, that's correct. So an abridged tax invoice normally does not have the details of the buyer, which is their name, their address, and their VAT registration number. So those are the three items when we ask you how they differ. Those are the three things you list for me. When do we issue, or when can we use an abridged tax invoice when we're claiming our input VAT? When will SARS allow it? So I'm just going to repeat the question. When will SARS allow us to use an abridged tax invoice when we claim the input VAT? Okay, so Mapaledi says it's required when we have a supply greater than 50 Rand, but it's less than 5,000, and that's correct. So remember, a bridged tax invoice is an invoice that doesn't have your buyer's details, but anything under 5,000 Rand and over 50 Rand, you can use it for it. As soon as it exceeds the 5,000, that's when you have to have the buyer's details, which is then a tax invoice. Great, guys. So I see you guys were listening last week. So let's quickly then just talk about how to calculate your VAT payable, VAT refundable. So we're just going to recap this. I touched on it last week as well. Okay, so output VAT, I want you to make a note. Output VAT goes with your income. Any type of income you receive, you will create output VAT if it's standard rated. If it's zero rated, your output VAT will be zero. Okay, so output VAT goes with revenue / income. Then we deduct input VAT. Now, input VAT is the VAT I claim from SARS. So SARS owes me money. And that is based on the expenses or the assets that I've acquired in a period or in a specific month. Okay, so input goes with expenses or acquisitions, which is your assets. Now, to work out whether you owe SARS money or SARS owes you money, you take the output VAT, so the money I have to pay over to SARS, less the money that SARS needs to pay me, and then the net amount. So that's why we call it net VAT payable or a refund due to SARS. That is the money that will either be paid to SARS. So if it's payable, I owe SARS that money. If it's a refund, SARS will pay that money back to me. Okay, so that is the basic calculation. Now, in a test or in an exam, they will generally ask you to work out the net VAT payable and refundable. So you will first go work out the output VAT, then you'll work out the input VAT, and then you do this calculation at the bottom to get to the net amount. Okay, so for now, just remember what the formula looks like. I will give you homework where you have to do a calculation like this so that you can see how it is actually done. Okay, now let's do question 3.7 in your textbook. So because I've got the old textbook, it's on page 95. You can tell me what's the page number in the new textbook. You can just type the page number there in the chat function for me, just so that the other students know. Okay, so Bernice says it's page 98 in your textbooks. Okay, thanks, guys. Okay, so what this question asks you to do is, in the first instance, we need to do a tax table. So they've given you a table, they've indicated the markup costs or markup on cost for certain amounts. Let me just move on to the next slide. I've put it up there. Okay, so this is just a summary of what you can see in your textbooks. So the first column, they give you a markup on cost. So you'll see they've indicated it for some, but there's one where you have to indicate what it is. Then they've given you the cost amount excluding VAT. So in this question, they ignoring VAT altogether. So they made it a bit easier for you guys. Then you've got the profit column and then the sales price column. Okay, now if we say markup on cost, our cost price will always be what percentage? Okay, so Mapaleti and Tumelo says when we talk about markup on cost, our cost is 100%. That's correct. Your markup on cost, now that percentage they're giving you there, what percentage does that relate to? Or which category would that fall under? If we look at our cost price, profit, and selling price scenario, where would that amount fall under? So that first column they've given you. Okay, so Tumelo says that was the profit percentage. The Kaledi as well. Yes, so that markup on cost percentage they've given you is actually your profit percentage. So if you missed that, you would have actually worked out the amount incorrectly. So the first thing you have to note is what type of profit or markup are we busy with. Now in this case, because it's on cost, our cost is 100%. Then we add this percentage that they've provided to get to the selling price percentage. Now using that information, let's work out what the different amounts are. Okay, so the first one, A. How would you guys work out A? You can just type in the formula there in the chat function for me. How would you work out the profit in on the slide, which I've indicated as A? Okay, so I'm just going to repeat the question. You can type the formula in the chat function for me. How will you calculate A? So what's the amount and how do you calculate it? Okay, who can tell me what's the answer for A? Okay, Tumelo says it's 10. Okay, Tumelo, how did you get to 10? Remember, when you show your answer, also show me the calculation so that the other students, if they made a mistake, can also see how you got to the answer. Okay, so Tumelo says we take the 100 Rand, which is the cost price, excluding VAT. Now we know our markup on cost percentage, so the profit percentage is 10. Now we want to work out the profit, so you show the percentage you want to work out at the top, and we divide it by what that amount that we have represent, which is the cost, and we said the cost is always 100% in this instance. So that is why it's 10 over 100. And then you work out the profit as 10. So that's correct, Tumelo. Thank you. Okay, who can, based on that answer, tell me what is B? Come on, guys. B should be easy. You've got the information. How do you calculate B? Okay, so I'm just going to repeat. We are busy with the question. Now we've already filled in A is 10 Rand. So who can tell me what is the selling price which is represented by the letter B? If my cost price is 100 and we just calculated the profit is 10 Rand, what would the selling price be? Okay, so Daniel says it is 110. How he got to the value is he took the 100 Rand cost price and he added the profit of 10 Rand to get 110. That's correct. So that is one of the ways you could do it. Now let's say you didn't have the profit amount. You could have taken the 100 Rand. Now we know the profit percentage is 100 plus the 10, which was 110, and then we divide it by 100, and then you would have received exactly the same amount. So there's two ways of doing it, but if you've got the cost and the profit amount, you just add it together. In the test, sometimes I would suggest just doing the formula if you have time to just check that if you've made a mistake at the profit. If you do this formula, you will pick up if you made a mistake. So that is just a quick check to do it, but that's only if you have additional time. I wouldn't do both, otherwise you waste time when you do the calculations. Okay, so let's move on to C. Okay, you can either give me C or D, depending on the information. So we set the markup on cost as 25%. So the selling price would be what percentage based on a markup of 25%? So that 500 Rand would represent what percentage? Because I'm just going to repeat that 500 Rand would represent what? Okay, so Mapeledi thinks it's 75 Rand. Okay, so Mapeledi, just remember the 75 Rand is if I say we've got a gross margin percentage, then the sales price would represent 100, and then the cost price would represent 75. Now remember, when you work out the selling price, if we say it's on cost, our cost is always 100%. So now you add the 25%, which is our profit margin, to get to what Rafiel always said, to the 125. So just be sure to add the percentage and not subtract it, then you get to the correct answer. Okay, so just remember that just be careful whether it's a plus or a minus, but it's good that you make a mistake rather now in class so that you can be mindful of it when you get to a test, because you guys do make mistakes and it's okay, but as long as you learn from it. Okay, so now we say 500 represents 125%. Now, if 500 is 125% and I want to work out what is 100%, how do I do that formula to work out C? So how do I work out the cost now? Based on the fact that the selling price represents 125%, but I actually want to work out 100%. Who can tell me what's the answer? Okay, so Rafiel says we take the 500, which is the selling price, you multiply it by 100, so that's the cost I want to work out, and we divide it by the 125, which is the percentage for the selling price, and then you get to an answer of 400 Rand. Okay, thank you, Rafiel. So now, if we say the cost is 400 Rand, the selling price is 500 Rand, what is the profit? Tumelo says it's 100 Rand. That's correct. So what Tumelo did is she took the 500, which is the selling price, and she deducted the cost price of 400, which gives you 100 Rand. Okay, so that's how we got to the 100 Rand profits. Now we move on to the next one. So we say the markup on cost percentage is 50%. Now they give you the profit amount of 750. Now you have to go work out the cost and the selling price. Now that 750 they've given you, what percentage does that represent in our equation? So that's 750 Rand. What percentage is linked to it? Okay, so Helder and Tumelo says it's the 50%. So that's correct. So remember the markup on cost percentage then the left-hand column is our profit percentage. Now if they give you the profit, that is the percentage that is linked to it. Okay, now if our profit is 50%, what is our cost price? So what is E? So if 750 is 50% of the cost price, or on the cost price, what is our cost price amount? So Benice says it's 1,500. Okay, that's correct. Now how we got to that amount is we take the 750, we multiply it by 100. Thanks, Rafielware. So we took the 750, we multiply it by the 100. We want to work out the cost. So that's why we've got 100 at the top. We divide it by the 50. That is the profit we were given. And then you get to 1,500. Now you can tell me what is the sales price then, which is represented by F. Okay, so Rafiel, we say it's the 2250. Okay, and that's correct. How you get it is you take the 1,500 plus the 750, or you can use what Tumelo has said. You take the 750, you multiply it with 150%, which is the 100 cost plus the 50 profit, divide by the profit percentage of 50, and you will get to 2250. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, now we get to the difficult one. This is the one where a lot of students struggled last year to work out the markup cost. So a lot of students could work out the cost price, but then they struggle to get to the markup percentage, or they struggle to work out both amounts. Okay, so let's start with the easiest one of the two. How do you work out the cost price on H? What is the cost price? Okay, so Bernice and Mapeledi, they say it's the 8,000 less the 4,000 profit. So our selling price less our profit gives us 4,000. That's correct. Okay, now if our cost is 4,000 and our profit is also 4,000, what is the markup on cost percentage? How do you calculate it? Because I'm just going to repeat that. If my cost is 4,000 and my profit is also 4,000, what is my markup on cost percentage and how do I calculate it? Okay, let's rephrase it. How do we actually calculate the markup on cost percentage? That is the percentage or the profit over the cost amount. So markup on cost always cost is 100. Okay, so how Tomelo said, we take the 4,000, which is the profit, we divide it by the cost, which is 4,000, and then multiply it by 100 to get to a percentage, which is 100%. Cameron on the other way said, okay, let's take the 8,000, which was our selling price. We deduct the profit, then we divide it by the cost. Okay, so Cameron, you just have a typo there. It should be 4,000 and not 40,000, but you worked it out correctly. So just remember when you write in a test, just to make sure that you don't add additional zeros. It does sometimes happen when you stressed or under a lot of pressure, you accidentally add an additional zero. But that's why I want you to give the formula that if you, for example, like Cameron, added an additional zero, but still got to the correct percentage, I can still mark based on where you made a mistake and still allocate marks. Okay, so Cameron went with the other approach. So he said, before we even work out the cost price, he took the information they've provided. So he said, okay, selling price less profit gives me, okay, so Cameron, actually the 4,000 they've given to you, so they would have been at the top, and then your 8,000 less your 4,000 would have been at the bottom to work out your cost amount. But in this scenario, because it's the same amount, you would have gotten to the same information. So your formula would have looked, to get to what Tomelo said, you would just have to adjust it as follow. I'm just going to type it in the formula bar for you guys just so that you have a correction as well. So you put the profit at the top and you divide it by the cost at the bottom to get to the percentage. Okay. Then the last line item, they've told you that the markup on cost percentage is 120%. Okay, they give you the selling price. So now we need to go work out the cost price as well as the profit. Now this one's a bit tricky. So let's see who can work it out. You can start either with the cost price or the profit. It's your choice. Let me know, how do you think you're going to work out those amounts? Okay, so I'm just going to repeat this. Okay, so Helder says how he approached it is he took the 2,200, he multiplied by 100, which is the cost percentage, and he divided it by 220. Now, how he got to the 220, I'm just going to put it in here for everyone's reference. He took the 100, which was the cost price. He added the 120, which was the profit, to get to the selling price, which is the 220. And then he divided that, the 100, by that amount to get to 1,000. So that's correct. So the cost price is 1,000. So for this one, what you had to see, and this is where a lot of students went wrong with this one specifically, is they forgot to add the 100 to the profit percentage. So most students last year went and they worked it out. They took the 2,200, they multiplied it with 100 over 120, and then got to the incorrect amount. So for this one, when you see this type of scenario, just remember to add the 100 to your profit to get to the correct selling price percentage. Okay, now if our cost price is 1,000 and our selling price is 2,200, what is our profit, guys? So I'm just going to repeat that. Okay, Bernice says 1,200, and that's correct. So we said a selling price is 2,200 If I deduct the cost price of 1,000, which we've calculated, I get to 1,200. And that is how we got to the profit. Okay, so before we move on to working out gross profit margins using markup costs, percentages, or vice versa, do you guys have any questions on this table that we've done now? Are you guys okay with this? If you're okay with this table, just give me a thumbs up or smiley face or whatever emoji you feel like. Okay, so Cameron asked, ma'am, I use the formula sales price less cost price over cost price. Is that incorrect? Okay, so let's quickly see, Cameron. So, okay, for G. So for G, you used the sales price, which was the 8,000. Okay, so Cameron, for G, you just had to flip your formula around. So your cost price needs to be, no, not your cost price. You had to do the profit, which is at the top, and then you've got cost price at the bottom. So yes, that's correct. So you've got profit over cost price. That is the correct formula. The one you typed in the chat function earlier, you showed the profit. Okay, well, they actually gave you the profit. So you showed your calculation for the cost price at the top, and then you divided it by the profit, or that's what it looked like. So that formula is correct. Profit at the top, so which is your sales price less your cost price over the cost price. Now remember, because of the fact that, okay, you went and worked out H first, so then you can use that formula. So it depends on how you work it out. But that formula is fine, Cameron. Bernice asked, can you please put the formula for markup, please, ma'am? Okay, Bernice, I'm not sure what you want for markup. What do you want me to show you exactly? How to work out the markup percentage. Okay, now remember markup percentage. Daniel, I don't have all the formulas on there, but what I'll do is I'll send you guys an email with all the formulas just to make sure you guys have it. In your textbook, they do show the formulas, but let's quickly have a look at what Bernice asked. Okay, so remember markup percentage is your profit divided by your cost price. Okay, so that's how you work out your markup percentage. Remember gross margin percentage, that is based on sales. So that is your profit over your selling price. Okay, now you can do it one of two ways. You can either use the percentages to calculate the percentage, or you can use the rand values to get to a percentage. They both work out the same way if you use those formulas. Okay, well, we're going to work out those formulas now. So let's move on to the next slide then. So now what you guys have to do is they either give you the markup percentage or the gross margin percentage. And then they ask you, okay, but now I've given you one of them. I want you to work out the equivalent percentage that will give you exactly the same profit at the end of the day. I want you to work out the alternative one. So if our gross margin is 25%, now they want to know what is my markup percentage that will give me exactly the same profit at the end of the day. Now, if we take the formula, how we do these, we first have to start with, okay, gross margin, we said what amount is going to be 100%. If we talk gross margin, which of my three amounts, cost price, profit, or selling price, will be 100%? Okay, so Tumelo says that means selling price is 100%. Now that's correct. So because they've given you the gross margin, our selling price is 100%. They've told you that your profit is 25%. Now, what is my cost price percentage then? Based on the information they've given you. So they told you profit is 25%. We know if we use gross margin percentage, the sales price needs to be 100%. So what is my cost price percentage based on that information? That's correct, Samelo. It's 75%. Now, if we want to work out the markup percentage, we said markup percentage is the profit percentage over the cost price percentage. Now, based on that formula, what is the markup percentage and the information that we've worked out so far? Okay, so remember markup percentage we said is our profit percentage over our cost price percentage. Now, if our profit percentage is 25%, our cost price percentage is 75% based on what we've worked out. Our markup percentage would be worked out as follows. Rafielwe, you also correct. So you use 25 over 75, and if you multiply by 100, you get to the percentage. So you get to 33.33%. Okay. That is how you work out the markup percentage. Now, okay, we showed you how to do A. Now, guys, show me how to do B. It's the same principle. What is the markup percentage then for B? Okay, who can tell me what's the markup percentage for B based on the information they've given you? Okay, so Rafilwe says, because the gross margin percentage is 50, so our profit is 50, our cost is 50, which is the 100 less the 50. So if you take 50 over 50, you multiply it with 100, our answer is 100%. Rafilwe, in your answer, that 100, you just need to put a percentage symbol behind it if you multiply it with 100 in the front. Otherwise, your formula isn't 100% correct. So just show a percentage at the end of it to show it's a percentage amount. Okay, but your calculation is spot on. So 50% over 50% gives us 100%, and that is our markup percentage. And now we're getting to do it from the other side now. So now they said markup percentage is 50%. Now if we do markup, what figure will be 100%? From cost price, profit, and selling price, which one will represent 100? Okay, if we say markup percentage, if we look at that, is our cost or our selling price 100%? Okay, Tamilo, that's correct. So our cost price is 100%. Now, what is our selling price if our markup is 50%? Our selling price would be what percentage? That's correct. So we take 100 plus 50 to get to 150. Now, what is our gross margin? If our selling price percentage is 150, how do we work out our gross margin percentage? Okay, so I'm going to help you guys out. So for gross margin, remember we said it's the profit over our selling price. Okay, so that's the formula. So our profit is 50%. Our selling price we worked out as 150. So if you take 50 over 150, you get 33.3%. Okay, now DU will work out exactly the same. Now let's quickly just talk about E before we end the session, okay? So that you guys can take a break, stretch your legs, get some coffee. Okay, now for E, they specifically ask you, they give you a product's cost price, they give you the selling price, and they ask you what is the markup percentage and the gross margin percentage. So now what you have to do is you have to do both the calculations. Now remember, when you do the calculations, you need to show me the formula in order to get the marks as well. But you also need to indicate what are you busy working out. The reason for that is if you just show me a percentage, it can be either or, I'm not sure which one you're referring to. So you need to indicate, are you busy with the markup? Are you busy with the gross margin? Now, based on that formula, our markup percentage, so I'm just going to do abbreviation. We can say it can either be percentages or it can be the physical amounts. So the profit is always the difference between our selling price and our cost price. Now you can either do the calculation separately and use the amount, or you can just show how you get to the profit amount. So for the first one, you would say it's 160 less the 100 Rand, get to 60 Rand over 100 gives me 60%. So that's what you write in your test or your exam. For the gross margin one, you do exactly the same formula. The only difference, remember, is that it is over our selling price and not our cost price, which then gives me a percentage of 37.5%. Okay, so when they ask you something like that in a test, you need to clearly show which one you're busy working out, and you have to show your calculation because they do give you marks for that profit amount. You generally get 1 mark for doing the profit calculation the first time around, and then you get a mark for using the correct, whether it's the cost or the selling price at the bottom, you would get an additional mark for that, and then they give you half a mark generally for the calculation. But something like this would count a total of 5 marks. Okay, so that's 5 easy marks if you just do the basic principles. Okay, in your textbooks, they talk about a VAT return. We've run out of time, so you guys can just go read up on this. Your VAT return, in essence, is a declaration of your output VAT you've raised, your input VAT you've claimed, and that shows your calculation for your VAT payable and VAT refundable to SARS. That's what you submit, and that's what SARS then audits to determine if they need to receive money from you or if you need to receive money from them. There is an example in your textbook. It looks like this, where you can see all the information. Now, because of time constraints, they won't ask you to complete a form like this in a test, but they will ask you to calculate the amounts. So you will have to be able to do the calculations. Okay, this is your homework, but I'll put these slides on VC Learner class. So this is just the remaining questions in your textbooks. Before I end this session and you guys go on a break, do you have any questions based on markup percentages that we focused on this morning? Are you guys still okay? Do you have any questions?